Good morning and welcome to a Morning Scoop for Sunday, February 13th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The spring game is in 62 days. The Notre Dame game is in 202 days. The game against Michigan in 286 days. The Super Bowl will kick off later tonight, and for the first time since the 1988 season, a team from Ohio will be playing in that game. The Cincinnati Bengals will face the Los Angeles Rams, and as we discussed yesterday with Marcus Hartman of the Dayton Daily News, 6 former Buckeyes will be on the field for that Bengals team. Eli Apple, Von Bell, Sam Hubbard, Isaiah Prince, Keandre Jones, and yes, Joe Burrow. Burrow and his time at Ohio State have been a hot topic ever since he left Columbus in the spring of 2018, but his Buckeye career could have ended very differently if it wasn't for one fateful practice back in the summer of 2017. Today we're going to talk about what happened and how it changed the course of Ohio State football history. My guest today is Buckeye Scoop Tony Gerdeman. Tony, this is a show we've sort of done before a little bit in some detail. I want to dive into it a little bit more today, so thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Tom. It's a topic that is near and dear to everybody's hearts who has ever argued about sports in any form or fashion.
Yeah, and this is one of these great, what if questions, because it's a moment that didn't feel like it was anything real significant at the time. It was like, oh, well, that's a bummer. He'll be back in a couple weeks. And then you look at it now, and there's the immediate effects, and then there's the butterfly effects beyond there, and it's like it completely changed college football for several years. And it all started Monday, August 21st, 2017. Burrow broke a bone in his throwing hand. He hit it on a teammate's helmet. That was it. Just hit his hand on a teammate's helmet, broke a bone. And I remember before that, we were both fairly sure that Burrow was going to be the top backup to JT Barrett that fall.
Yeah, we even had an episode of Buckeye Weekly titled something to the effect of, we know who the Ohio State backup quarterback is. And it was that my thought back then was Joe Burrow for sure. And a lot of it was just based on how connected he was to JT Barrett at the time. They were attached at the hip. And when Ohio State would tweet out videos of practices or workouts, you always saw Burrow right next to JT Barrett, always giving encouragement, always just very leader-like. And then sometimes you would see Dwayne Haskins in the background, or you just didn't see him as much as you saw Joe Burrow. So it sure seemed like Burrow was the guy and the guy that as the backup. But it once that hand was broken, then that threw everything into a loop. But before then, yeah, I'm with you. I thought he was the backup. He was the backup the year before. Now, of course, they had to open up the competition as the backup quarterback because Dwayne Haskins was, he redshirted in 2016. So in 2017, this was a guy that, remember, Urban Meyer said when he saw him in high school, he was as advanced fundamentally as any quarterback recruit he's ever seen. So, of course, you're going to give him an opportunity to compete for the backup job. And so it was certainly one of the storylines going into 2017. But I'm with you. I thought that was Joe Burrow's job to lose, and I guess technically that's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, after that injury, Burrow or Haskins took over that number 2 spot on the depth chart. Burrow then didn't get into a game for a month. It was August 21st that he broke that hand, and then September 23rd, that was a game against UNLV where he finally got on the field. And then by that point, the way Urban Meyer ran things, Dwayne Haskins was pretty much entrenched as the backup at that point.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that Urban Meyer said at that time as well, that you can't have a competition for the backup quarterback during the season. That all happens before the season, because once you know who your backup quarterback is, and since that was decided by default, you just have to prepare that backup quarterback to be ready to step in. So they can't be worried about competing and watching behind their back or watching over their shoulder for Joe Burrow. Dwayne Haskins has to be ready to go in at a moment's notice. So he has to prepare like a starter while only getting, 20% of the reps. And really there's not many reps behind the backup. So it was a situation where even once Joe Burrow came back, he really had no shot at getting back into the picture unless, like the same thing that happened with him, there was an injury or Dwayne Haskins just, failed throughout practice, and Dwayne Haskins was too good to do that. And so, yeah, once the season starts, there's really no competition there unless there's utter failure. And all of these guys were pretty much were too good to do that, as we've seen throughout the rest of their careers in college and then with Joe Burrow in the NFL. So just one of those things where it's almost like your answers get locked in and then they stay that way until something drastically changes, and nothing really did until Ann Arbor.
Yeah, and I mean we'll get to Ann Arbor in a second, but you go back to that UNLV game, and that was a game that Ohio State was up 1,000,000,000 for most of the game, and Haskins played a bunch in that game, and he was just like okay, like he made a couple wild plays, and then he also threw a pick six, and he wasn't particularly accurate. Burrow came in and just garbage time and was 4 for 4. So theoretically the coaching staff could have changed their minds then, but as you said, they were kind of locked in. And the other thing that I think people maybe kind of forget is at that point, now it seems like very obvious that the debate should have been Haskins versus Burrow. But then that was just a week or two after the loss to Oklahoma and Jackson Carman being on campus. And then the whole debate in Columbus at that point was not Haskins versus Burrow. It was, should Dwayne Haskins be starting over JT Barrett? That was the topic of conversation. And Burrow was just kind of like, and then there's also this other guy, which, I mean, again, you look back now and it's like, how did everyone not see this then? But that wasn't the conversation when you were actually there living through it.
No, that's true. You kind of forget about that part where so many people had so much to say about Dwayne Haskins getting in there, and he showed it. Like, you look through his numbers over that year, and he had a couple of iffy outings, but then was really consistent and good. He ended up completing 70% of his passes in 2017, which is pretty much what he then did as a starter. So you got a pretty good idea of what he was able to do. But it is interesting that came up, that argument, which I guess shouldn't be a surprise since that's an eternal argument that always comes up. But it is interesting to think back now. Now it's a Burrow versus Haskins. Then it was Haskins versus Barrett, and I mean we saw it this past year with Stroud versus McCord early in the season, and it's just one of those. It just always seems to happen. But yeah, that was certainly a time to be alive when you've got a 4-year starter at quarterback who was. I think that 2016 season convinced a lot of people that JT Barrett can't get you to that next step, so it might be time to look at somebody who can. And from what little they saw of Dwayne Haskins, you see the arm. Obviously, he was a very good thrower, that maybe this is the guy that could get you there. And you only have so many windows to get to the playoffs. And so once once you suffer that one loss, there was certainly a lot of consternation to, hey, let's move on.
Yeah, and then, you mentioned the Ann Arbor, the game up in Michigan where JT Barrett gets injured, and then Dwayne Haskins comes in and saves the day, and that, kind of cemented him in a lot of ways as this is probably the front runner moving forward. But then, there's this wild alternate history where, okay, Burrow doesn't break that bone, and then he's the one who comes in after JT Barrett's knee injury against Michigan, and then Haskins potentially that cements Burrow as the starter, and then Haskins potentially transfers. How differently do you think the next couple of seasons would have gone in Columbus if, Joe Burrow is the guy who sticks around and Dwayne Haskins leaves?
Yeah, what I think is that Ohio State probably runs the ball better in 2018 with Burrow as the quarterback rather than Dwayne Haskins. I think they move the ball just fine, and the offense is, again, one of the top offenses in the nation, because I think Joe Burrow would have been ready to do everything that JT Barrett could do, and then more throwing the ball. But you still go back to there was also a 2018 defense that had its issues, so I don't know that there's a national championship that year in 2018. I wonder, does Dwayne Haskins then go off to, I don't know, does he go off to Maryland? He was committed to Maryland at one time. Does he go back home? And if he goes to Maryland and Joe Burrow stays in Columbus, that's much less impactful than Burrow going to LSU and winning it all and winning a Heisman, because I don't think Dwayne Haskins is going to be winning it all at Maryland. But then we get to 2019, Tom, and that's really where Ohio State was good enough as it was to win a national title in 2019. And one of my great regrets of almost getting to see something was Ohio State's secondary against Joe Burrow's passing game in the national title game. And, of course, the replay officials robbed us of having that opportunity to do that. But I don't know that Joe Burrow wins them a national title in 2019 because Justin Fields certainly could have, and I don't know that, would they have? I'm not sure he would have made as much of an impact or any more difference than Justin Fields, other than having more experience, and so maybe that plays in somewhere. But I don't see Justin Fields as the reason the Buckeyes didn't win it in 2019. So that's why I don't know how much things change if Burrow is the guy there. Although I still think they win one at some point with Joe Burrow, but there's no guarantee he's there in 2019 anyway. He could have left for the NFL after the 2018 season.
Yeah, and that's certainly a possibility, but you sort of assume first year of starting quarterback. He wasn't outstanding at LSU in 2018. He was just kind of okay, and you'd assume, probably okay to decent in 2018. If he sticks around for 2019, I think the thing that maybe changes things is not that Ohio State is so much better with Burrow than they were with Fields. It's that LSU is just still a crappy LSU team. So then Ohio State and Clemson are potentially the 1-2 seeds. So Ohio State gets the first round bye against Oklahoma like LSU did, or gets plays whoever else comes out of the SEC or whoever comes instead of LSU. So is that Georgia? Is that whoever else? You potentially get to the national championship game, and then at that point, okay, you pays your money and you take your chances. So that I think is maybe what changes things more than anything else. It's not that Ohio State is so much better. It's that you don't have that generational LSU team. Because, Clemson, Ohio State, LSU that year were probably, all three of those were probably better than any of the teams in the 2021 season. So those were three remarkable teams. You take one of those out, that probably changes the calculus a little bit there. And I think the butterfly effect goes way beyond that. Haskins at Maryland, they didn't have the instant eligibility, but Dwayne Haskins quarterbacking that Maryland team in 2018, the Maryland team that scored 51 points in Ohio State anyway, boy, that would have been, they didn't have instant eligibility, but that would have been quite a shootout. But LSU never wins a national title. And then the really interesting butterfly effect thing is Justin Fields, when he's looking to leave Georgia after 2018, he doesn't go to Ohio State because they have Joe Burrow. So where does Justin Fields end up? Does he go to LSU? Does he go to Penn State, where he was committed to Penn State at one point, much like Haskins was originally committed to Maryland. He ends up at Maryland. Just Justin Fields ends up at Penn State. Does James Franklin all of a sudden have a quarterback? What does that look like? I mean, Justin Fields versus Joe Burrow in 2019 in the Ohio State-Penn State game, that's a game I would like to see. That would have been quite a showdown. I mean, or does he go to LSU to save Ed Orgeron's job there? Because Joe Burrow's not there to save Ed Orgeron's job, and Ed Orgeron is probably out of a job after 2018 or 19 if it's the same crappy LSU offense. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting alternate histories of where some of these deck chairs get shuffled. Well,
and you've got Oklahoma in the picture as well. They ended up with Jalen Hurts, but I bet they would have rather had Justin Fields. Maybe. Obviously, Hurts was the more proven, more experienced guy, but if they get Fields, then that leaves Hurts going somewhere. It's just you're moving all of these pieces, and then if this, then this, and you'd almost have to get a whiteboard with all of these moving parts and all of these just pictures of the quarterbacks with magnets, and okay, now this guy is here, this guy is there, and you move one guy, and then everybody else is going to have to move because of it. And so it ended up, I think the ultimate thing I think is it ended up best for, not best, ended up just fine for everybody, and it ended up best for LSU. I don't know, I think it ended up pretty good for Ohio State. Certainly didn't end up bad for them. You just wonder, and this is something I mentioned to you before the show, what if JT Barrett never gets hurt? And then there is no... Because what eventually did it for Urban Meyer is he saw Dwayne Haskins in action on the road in Michigan step up. There was nothing Joe Burrow could do to pass that. And so you wonder if that was never an issue, then do they go into spring camp on equal footing, and I'm guessing they do. But ultimately, for Joe Burrow, it was, I need to know I'm the starter. And Ohio State couldn't tell him that, probably wouldn't have told him that anyway. And so you go somewhere where there's plenty of talent around you, somewhere that has been underachieving all along, and where you knew there wasn't going to be much competition. And if you're a quarterback, there's no other place where there's usually no competition like LSU. And so it's very, very, because we were talking, is he going to go to Cincinnati? Is he going to go to Nebraska? What about Ohio? And he's like, no, I'm going to go win a national title. I'm going to go win the Heisman. I'm going to go set all kinds of records. Now, it took him 2 years to do it. But it was always amusing to me how people were so dismissive when they were watching him in 2018 or 2019, 2018. And it's just like, well, just wait. You know, this is a caveman offense, and he's doing the best he can. And he certainly eventually found the right fit.
Yeah. Another interesting alternate history is, let's say he does go to play for Ohio, because his dad was a defensive coordinator for Ohio University back then. I mean, that becomes like a Randy Moss at Marshall, just like, oh, this is just like that you are playing on JV difficulty, and Ohio University is beating everyone 60-20 every game, and that would have been fun to see in its own way. I don't know if he ends up as the first overall draft pick in that route. So this would have I think things have worked out okay for Joe Burrow the way things played out, but that's a fun, interesting. If he goes to Nebraska, what does Nebraska football look like with Joe Burrow for a couple of years? Because I'm going to say arguably would have been an upgrade over Taylor Martinez, Adrian Martinez.
That's your opinion.
Does it matter is the question. Whether it's Taylor or Adrian Martinez is kind of the next follow-up question. But yeah, this is one of my favorite. Like how different things would look. I don't think it's quite as good as what if Rich Rod had taken the Alabama job in 2006 after Mike Shula got fired. I think that's my favorite from this century. The ripple effects of that, and maybe we have to do a show on that at some point this summer, because that one, wow, the Nick Saban's still out there somewhere. Some other program becomes the most dominant program of the century.
Tom, one of those programs might have been the program where Lloyd Carr retired from, and they needed a head coach. But as we know, and has been proven, Nick Saban was not able to win in the Big Ten. Not good enough to win consistently in the Big Ten, and wouldn't have been able to do it at Michigan either. Yeah,
that's there's a whole lot of interesting landing spots for Nick Saban there, and Nick Saban against Jim Tressel, and then does Urban Meyer leave Florida if Nick Saban's not there to ruin his life down in the SEC? And I mean the ripples go a lot of different directions there with that one, but this one's a pretty good, interesting one as well, and obviously very directly tied to Ohio State. So and we were there for all of it. I remember standing in the Cotton Bowl locker room afterwards, after the game, talking to Joe Burrow and him saying, "I want to be the starter somewhere," and I go, that word somewhere that seems telling, and turns out it was. So, well, Tony, thank you for joining me. We will all get to watch Joe Burrow on our TV sets a little later on today as he leads the Cincinnati Bengals against the LA Rams. It should be a fun game. Best of luck to our friends in Cincinnati, despite their their chilly and what have you. But it should be a fun game. Hopefully things work out well. It would be nice to have a Super Bowl championship in the state of Ohio at some point. And you can. We're probably pretty much done talking about pro football at this point, but we'll be back to more direct Ohio State topics tomorrow with all of our great podcasts. We'll have the Morning Scoop, you've got Buckeye Weekly, you've got Big Me Kickoff, you've got Gives in the Bank, you've got Around the Oval. You can find all of them wherever you're listening to this. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find all of them. You can subscribe right there, leave us a 5-star rating and review as well. And if you prefer to watch on YouTube, it's youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. Leave a thumbs up on whatever videos you're watching from us. We really appreciate that. And also hit that bell, subscribe to our channel so you get notified every time we post a new video. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.